for those who cannot speak. And so if it's just us speaking, we don't mind, because we know we're going to impact some other people. We know there's a need for a county-level independent review board with subpoena power to oversee Westchester's police department. We know they can't police themselves. It's obvious. We know that the complaint procedures are jaded with intimidation. We have people who are still unaccountable for their unprofessional behavior. We need the oversight at the New York State and federal level so that we can have justice for Ken Chamberlain Sr., for Dan Roy Henry, for Officer Christopher Ridley, for others. Like, the list is long. We're not going to forget. We're not going to let it go. What I want to share with you is that there's a bigger, broader issue. It's called stop and frisk. You know, stop and frisk is the attempt to racially profile our people. And I want you to know that it's critical that we stop and frisk so we can end racial profiling in New York City, in Westchester, everywhere. I get calls from Tarrytown, from all kinds of areas, from Mamaroneck, Rye, everywhere, because people of color don't get to walk the street the same way as others. People of color are at risk doing ordinary things. Stop and frisk. We've got to get it under control. So as part of our efforts to bring this issue to the forefront of the nation, the NAACP has joined with the National Action Network, with United Health Workers, and with other organizations to have a national march in New York City on June 17th. I'm going to tell you, it's a march of silence. It's a march that emulates a march that went on 50 years ago. So I have more information on that. The next thing I want to bring your attention to is this attempt to implement a stand your ground type legislation. It's currently on the floor. It's sponsored by Senator William Larkin Jr. and Senator George D. Mazzari, and what we've got to do is call them. So I'm going to have flyers available with their phone numbers on. This law authorizes a person to use physical force, including deadly physical force, in defense of a person, in defense of a premise, or in defense of a dwelling, residence, or vehicle. It is stand your ground in New York. Now, we know what that law has already meant. We know that that law will not be applied fairly. And the best strategy is to stop it before it starts. And it's going to take you calling these senators. It's going to take you writing letters, because if we don't respond, it'll be on the floor and it will pass. We need to respond. So I'll have details of the number of that law. And if you're taking notes, it's 0281. But I'm going to give you the details, all right? And last but not least, you know the NAACP is solidly about voter registration. And what people may not realize is that there's a primary coming up June 26th. And since you have to be registered 25 days before that primary, the deadline for registering people for that primary is June 1. And when is June 1? Next week. A lot of people, when I mention this, say, what vote? What primary? What are you talking about? Well, it is unusual because primaries are usually held in September, right? So we know this is strategic planning on the part of people who don't want us to vote. We know. And we have to be proactive. You've got to get folks registered. And remember, ex-felons can vote, but they must be registered. So we've got to be proactive in our community, getting people registered to vote. And by the end of the day, I will have flyers, so you don't have to remember everything that I'm saying to you right now. I will have flyers to help you so that you can be involved and be proactive. Now, Julie gave me a program to follow, so I'm going to just say by way of housekeeping, we have in the house Andrew Courtney. Andy, raise your hand. Okay. Andy and I go way back to Woodlands, and he's certainly a fighter for justice, always has been. And I want you to know, because he'll be taking pictures, that he's here today on our behalf, taking those pictures. So don't worry about Andy. Second thing is we need volunteers to help the traffic monitoring. We have yellow vests back there and tape, and you have to wear them, but we think it's a good idea to have the yellow vested volunteers to keep us safe and to guide the walk so that we're not in any trafficking trouble. So if you want to be a volunteer right now and you know you're willing to do that, please go to the back and get your vest. That said, I do believe that we have to stay involved. We have to reach out and get other people. I know that a lot of folks feel it's not my fight until it's their son, their daughter. We have to point that out to them, that it's only, what did they say, 6 degrees away? Well, I think it's smaller than that. I think it's 2 or 3 degrees away. And so the best thing we do today by lifting our voice is to snag those who may have some doubt, snag those who may be on the borderline. And so to help us and to move us forward, we're going to have an update on Ken Chamberlain Sr.'s case. We want to know where we go from here. So I'm going to ask Mayo Bartlett, Randy McLaughlin, and Ken Chamberlain Jr. to come forth in that order. All right? Everybody with us? Okay.
Who's not a uniformed police officer was engaged in conduct where they yelled racial slurs at a person, broke that man's door down when they were there to give medical assistance, and then taunted the individual, used virtually deadly physical force because they used a taser against the taser protocol, because that protocol says that tasers are not to be used against apparently elderly people and against people who have medical conditions. And they knew that Mr. Chamberlain had a medical condition. They knew that he was elderly. How is it that we use the tool of the grand jury to investigate this matter? Anyone else would be charged by felony complaint. And if the district attorney's office felt that you were guilty of nothing, you shouldn't be charged at all. So I'm suggesting today that the officers that were engaged in possible criminal acts should have been charged by felony complaint, and if necessary, that case could have gone to the grand jury. And if there were officers that they believed didn't do anything wrong, they shouldn't be charged at all. But they also shouldn't be investigated by grand jury. And I think that in this case, the grand jury is used as a shield for the district attorney's office. So if a true bill was voted and there was an indictment, it wouldn't have been the fault of the district attorney's office, it would have been the grand jury, an anonymous group of 23 people. And when there is no indictment, we blame an anonymous group of 23 people for not having an indictment. When you look at police accountability, the police are perhaps the only group in the country which can engage in any conduct that you can imagine and still maintain their job. If anyone else employed by the government was to use racial slurs and curse at a person, they're not going to work there anymore. Right now, there's legislation being proposed to deal with teachers. There's a suggestion that teachers should be graded based upon the success of their classes, which totally disregards the fact that you may come from a class that has more need. You may teach people who don't have the same resources, who are not quite as affluent, whose mothers and fathers are not doctors and engineers and attorneys. But we want to talk about accountability for teachers. But we don't want accountability for people who can kill you, who can break your door down and enter your home. And even though we have audio tape and videotape of this incident showing exactly that, there's no mistake here. And we are extremely fortunate because normally in these situations, unfortunately, Mr. Chamberlain can't be here. He can't be here in the flesh to tell us what happened, but he does testify to us from audio tape and from a videotape. And on that tape, you hear him saying, "I'm an old man with a heart condition. Please leave. I'm okay. I didn't call you. I don't want to let you in my home." And the police say, "We don't give an F," and call him the N-word. How do you still maintain your employment? Why are we as taxpayers still paying to support that type of behavior? And even more troubling, where is the accountability? And in my estimation, I'm speaking purely from my personal standpoint here, that accountability is not going to come from civilian complaints. Because when you have a civilian complaint review board, who do you think is going to sit on that board? They're not going to draw anyone from this crowd, I'm quite sure. What's going to happen normally is it's going to be someone connected to someone. The name may have changed through marriage, or you may not make the connection immediately, but normally you will expect that there will be no finding of wrongdoing. In fact, I'm unaware, personally, of any findings of wrongdoing. And you can go back to Irma Marquez, the lady in Yonkers, 50-some-odd years old, who was at a bar celebrating, a restaurant, celebrating I believe her niece's birthday, and the niece had a medical condition. They called the police, and she was obviously, and as one would expect, agitated and excited and concerned more than anything for her niece's well-being. And about a dozen Yonkers police officers lift her off the ground, drop her on her face, virtually breaking her face. Well, none of these officers are charged. This happened on video. I'm not aware of any civilian complaints that were substantiated where there was any finding of wrongdoing. Let any of us, any dozen of us, pick one of us up, another in this room, and drop them on their face like that, and see if there's no wrongdoing, and let it be on tape. So I believe we need accountability in the form of either an inspector general, which will have a standing body to investigate these types of matters, in the form of the Department of Justice, which will investigate these types of matters, and in the form of the New York State Attorney General's office, which will investigate these types of matters. And it needs to be removed from people who seek to be elected and people who seek to have law enforcement bodies endorse them when it's time to run. And it's particularly troubling to me that when we're meeting with the district attorney's office, on the district attorney's desk is a White Plains PBA mug. Well, how can I have a White Plains PBA mug on my desk and give you some expectation that I'm going to investigate the White Plains Police Department? So these are some of the things that we need to concern ourselves with. And today, I think, is just a beautiful day, in particular because I see young people who are just getting started, and that's one of the primary reasons we're here today. And I see people who could be their grandparents or perhaps great-grandparents and everyone in between. And this is what it's going to take. And I also look out and see people of all nationalities, all ethnicities. And it's important that we realize that that's what this is about also. So Mr. Chamberlain happens to have been a person who is going to be an avenue for us all to come together much more, and for us all to decide and understand that, yes, we value our police and we need police, but we need them to understand what they're there to do, and that they're not here with a license to treat us any way that they feel they want to. And when you look at these brutality cases, it's not just against African American people, it's not just against Latinos. We have the Hatter brothers, who are Jordanian and who are beaten while in custody and called ragheads. We have white gentleman whose name I'm not at liberty to release right now, but I hope to be able to release later, who's arrested for a DWI and thrown down onto a sidewalk by some of the same officers who were involved in the death of Mr. Chamberlain. And they're not charged with resisting arrest or disorderly conduct or obstruction of governmental administration. They're not charged with assaulting the officers. And the excuse is, well, he didn't get in the car when I asked him to get in the car. So because someone doesn't move quickly enough, you throw them down on their face. And this is a white man who works in an affluent area, who's a white-collar person. So if they can do that to them, who will they not do it to? And if we will engage in activity to smooth that over, well, why are those individuals who are engaged in that activity in office? And we just tried, and this will be the last thing I say before I turn it over to my colleagues, but we just tried a case last week for 4 days. And it's a case where we had a gentleman that we represented who lived at 135 on the same floor as Mr. Chamberlain, okay, on South Lexington Avenue, who was going to visit a friend who lived one house over, one building over. Probably if the buildings were in this room, you could walk from here to the wall, and that would be 159 South Lexington Avenue. And he walks over and goes upstairs to visit his friend. He lives on the White Plains Housing Authority premises. The gentleman he went with works at the White Plains Housing Authority. Police officers, Anthony Corelli and Orellana, Anthony Corelli, who shot and killed Mr. Chamberlain, or Alana, who was allegedly with Anthony Corelli when he's beating the Hattar brothers and calling them ragheads, both of whom have civil rights charges pending against them in federal court. See these two gentlemen getting ready to go into the building, and they look around, just as I did. Nothing that would make you think they were doing anything wrong, and they go into the building. According to the police, they're in that building 5 to 7 minutes. But how would we know that? Because the police don't make any notes. They don't have reports other than one report, and that one report's not written predominantly by the officer who's testifying, so he's using someone else's notes to refresh his own recollection. And they go up, and when they come back down, these officers call over and have them arrested. Well, why would that be the case? These gentlemen are not on a bar-out list. They're not told they can't be on the premises of the Housing Authority. And the most troubling part about it is that the Housing Authority sent us a letter from Matt Carter, the Executive Director of the Housing Authority, asking that those charges be dismissed. And our local district attorney refused. She said it doesn't matter what the Housing Authority wants to do, we are going forward. So a year later, we are here trying this case. And you know, it does matter what Mr. Carter said, because if it was your house and you said that the person that was visiting you had a right to be there, there's no case. No one's charged. We believe the police misled the Housing Authority into believing that these individuals had done something wrong. And then we learned that Officer Corelli is involved, and they go into a campaign in the district attorney's office to hide him and to make sure we can't let the jury know who he is and what he's done in the past. Well, when we ask the officers about rules, because the district attorney's office made it all about rules. You need to know your rules and your regulations. We should all be fully familiar with the laws of the state of New York and every other state. If you're driving across the country, you better know what the laws of Idaho say, because it's up to you to know that. You can't claim ignorance that you didn't know these 25 volumes of laws. But when we asked the police, did they understand the rules and regulations of the Housing Authority, they said no. Well, then why are you arresting people? When we asked the police if they understood the rules and regulations of the White Plains Police Department, they said no. When we asked them, why are people who live in the Housing Authority able to have visitors? They didn't know the answer to that. When we asked them, can one person from an apartment go to another apartment who lives there, they didn't know the answer to that. But they called Mr. P.O. from the Housing Authority, and he said, sure, the Housing Authority is open to the public. People can come and go on the grounds. And you can go into the buildings as long as you're there for a legitimate reason. You can't just go in and hang out, and you can't go in and commit crimes. That's fair enough. And that's what this gentleman was doing. He was told the police, I'm going to visit my friend in apartment 8H. So the officers go to 8H and knock on the door. When no one answers the door, they come out and arrest the client. So I guess if the friend that you were visiting is not home anymore, chooses not to open the door, bad luck for you, you get arrested. Okay, and then you have to hire an attorney, and for the next year of your life, you take days off from work and hope you don't get fired, and hope that you don't get convicted for something you didn't do. But when we ask the officers, you see these gentlemen commit any crimes outside? Answer is no. You see them commit any crimes inside? Answer is no. And when you ask, how can you arrest a person? Do you need a warrant or probable cause? The answer is yes. But there was no probable cause. They essentially profiled these people. And this is the Neighborhood Conditions Unit, which is equivalent of the Street Crime Unit in New York City. So these are some things we need to think about in terms of police accountability, in terms of making sure that our elected officials also are aware and are holding police accountable. And I think many of them are not aware that these things are happening because they're not public. Most of the time you'll never hear about it, and they give you an offer. Take this offer, plead guilty to this. It's just a fine. You're not going to go to jail. And a lot of people do that. It's easier at that moment. You don't know that later this is going to be used against you if you get arrested for the same thing again. Well, he pled to trespass before, okay, because that actually was what happened with this gentleman. And we said, well, he should have never pled guilty to trespass because he never trespassed. So our next steps are seeking a federal investigation in this matter and filing a civil rights lawsuit. And I'm going to not go too much more into that because my colleague Randy McLaughlin is going to get into that at this point. But again, I thank you for taking time today, in particular on Memorial Day holiday, and I know lots of people travel and are not here. And it's essential that we're together, because when we stand together, that's how we can ensure that this doesn't happen again, and that the young people that we see here will be able to tell these stories as things that happened in the past. But if we don't do our job, they'll be the ones. They'll be the ones talking about what happened to their family members, or maybe to themselves, or to their friends. Why, when their friend came to visit, he or she got arrested, okay, or something worse happened. So I thank you again, and I look forward to listening to the other speakers and to participating and speaking to all of you. Thank you.
A lot of things you'll be doing on a Saturday afternoon. It's a holiday weekend, and I'll be honest with you, when I heard we were doing this on this weekend, I'm like, well, I hope we get a turnout because folks do other things. But I remember a great revolutionary, his name was Thomas Paine, and he said, we don't need summer soldiers, oh, this is the summertime coming. We need winter soldiers. And winter soldiers are people who will march despite the weather, despite the cold. And so you all are winter soldiers. You're here on a day when you could be doing something else, but you're standing with this family, you're standing with this community in a campaign for justice. Mayo mentioned that today is, or this is Memorial Day weekend, and I think we should celebrate Memorial Day weekend. I'll just wait for folks to settle down. Take your time, brother. We're in no rush. Go ahead, what you gotta do. We're pulling out some seats so folks can sit down. Please feel free. So Memorial Day weekend is traditionally a weekend when we celebrate those who have given their lives in the service of our country. Well, I'd like us to celebrate as well those who've also given their lives in the service of our country and in the struggle for freedom and justice. And that's Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. Now, I don't want to hold you up. There's a lot to do and a lot of speakers, and we want to march and comply with our permit and not get arrested. That's why you have lawyers here. Yeah. Just behave, do what you're supposed to do, stay on the sidewalk, keep moving. If a policeman approaches you, let one of the marshals handle it, let one of the lawyers handle it, you just keep moving, and that's it. We got a number of lawyers here. And there's a lawyer I wanted to make mention of. Most of you should know him. If you don't, you ought to. And that's one of my old schoolmates, actually, Michael Sussman, who represents... He represents, as you know, the family of D.J. Henry, and he's also one of the soldiers we should celebrate in the journey for justice. That's great. I've just heard that, and I appreciate that. You're coming up after Mr. Chamberlain, or some point in this program. Okay, so where are we? Mayo mentioned it briefly, and where we are is this. The day after we heard there was no indictment here, and I'll be frank with you, I mean, we went through the process, but I wasn't expecting much of a result from this DA here. I really wasn't. She has a pretty poor record in terms of these kinds of cases. She didn't indict the officer in the killing of D.J. Henry. She didn't indict the Chamberlain. Now, how you cannot get an indictment when you've got a cop outside calling an African American the N-word, when you've got a man inside his home minding his business, and you break his door down and enter his apartment and kill him? I don't know. I mean, I'm baffled. But in the case that Mayo mentioned, Ms. Hermes, she was picked up and thrown down to the ground. And they indicted her. For what, I don't know, but they indicted her, took her to trial. Her face was like, you would have thought she'd been in the ring with Mike Tyson. It was just battered and bruised, just everywhere. So, but DAs are political people, I get that, and they need votes. And they think our votes aren't as important, and our support isn't as important as the support of the PBA. Okay, I get that. That's why I don't run for office. That's why I don't deal with those issues. So the very next day, we sent a letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office and to the Attorney General of the United States demanding a federal investigation, not only of this case, but we think that's warranted, but we wanted a federal investigation of policing in White Plains. Because given the cases we've heard about and that we know about, there's a problem here in how they police the community, and not just our community. It's how they police Mamaroneck Avenue. I mean, I understand people get rowdy, they get drunk, I get that. But that doesn't mean you beat them up when you arrest them and charge them falsely with crimes that they didn't commit. So we sent that letter off by fax and email at 4 p.m. on the Friday after the indictments didn't come down. By 5:30, I was getting a call from the New York Times saying the U.S. Attorney has opened a federal investigation into the killing of Mr. Chamberlain. Now again, I'm really pleased that that investigation's opened. They're going to be looking at the evidence. I think they'll do a fair job. But you can't depend, frankly, on the government to take care of your rights. You've got to take the law in a legal way into your own hands. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit in June against the City of White Plains and the officers who were responsible for the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. And that's going to happen in June. You'll hear about that. So one way or another, whether it's a federal criminal investigation indictment, because those cops can go to jail if that indictment comes down from the feds, or whether we sue them civilly and make them pay for what they've done. It's one way or another, we're going to get justice for this family, and the truth will come out. I mean, the truth will come out, and that's our job. So, in conclusion, thank you all for coming out. Thank you for supporting this family. It's going to be a long road ahead of us. But if we stay firm, we stay committed to the cause, we will one day, these young children, as Mayo said, will not have to face the issues we're facing today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. As my lawyer already said, we definitely want to thank each and every last one of you for coming out. We appreciate that, especially the fact that it's a holiday weekend. And as he said, I'm sure there are 1,000 other places that you could be rather than be here. But I think that when I look out and I see you guys here, I think that it sends a message that the people of Westchester County and the surrounding communities are finally looking at this and saying that enough is enough. That this pandemic or disease of police misconduct, brutality, and criminality has to stop. And just like any other disease, if it's not treated, it will eventually kill you. And when I say that, I mean us. Because the police have already made it clear that they feel they can do whatever they want to whomever they want. And they'll just make up a story. It took 5 months before I was even acknowledged by the City of White Plains, by the mayor or the Common Council. 5 months before they even expressed their condolences to my family. And that only happened because I made mention of it in the news. And the media got a hold of it. So I guess their media people said, hey, listen, you better say something. 6 months later, now you see we have no indictment. And I sat back and I said, wow, you have all these different cases that are coming up of this same neighborhood conditions unit, these same officers, and a light didn't go on in Janet DeFiore's head to say, I better look at this and better investigate this? Of course it did. She just didn't care. And I sat back and I've done the what ifs, and I do it every day, and people tell me not to do it, but I do it every day. I think about the day that my father was killed, and I say, what if I was there? What if I had gotten a phone call? What if the police had called me? What if my friend that actually let me know what was going on? What if he called me 10 or 15 minutes ahead of time? Would I have been able to help my father? Would he be alive? And when I sit back and I look at the way that black men are actually treated, I have to come back with the answer and say, no, I'd probably be dead right along with my father, because they probably would have killed me too. And they definitely would have planted something on me and said, he attacked us. I sit back and I look at the elected officials in Westchester County, only Susie Oppenheimer was the only one that said something to the Westchester County DA. No one else. But my bigger question is where are our black elected officials?
That's right.
Where are they at?
That's right.
Why haven't any of them said anything to me or my family? And I try to hold my tongue and be careful about everything that I really want to say. But I mean, where are your Ruth Hassel Thompsons? Where are your Andrea Stewart Cousins? Where are they? You have Benjamin Boykin that sits on the Common Council. A black man said nothing. Just signed his name on a letter along with the rest of the Common Council saying, we want to extend our condolences to you and your family. The Human Rights Commission, Ken Jenkins, one of the highest black elected officials in Westchester County, said that there are mechanisms in place to deal with this.
That's right.
God, disgusting.
Go on the Human Rights Commission's website and you tell me if you see anything. Because I checked and I saw nothing. So I don't want to call him a liar, but I'll just say it's an untruth. I'll leave it at that. Now, the case, as my attorneys told you, is under federal investigation right now, and it really is my hope and desire that we do get a phone call from them and they say that there will be an indictment. But it doesn't stop there. From that indictment, I want a conviction. From conviction, I want us to definitely look into oversight, not on a state level, because it's evident on a state level that they're not going to do anything. Look at the case up in Newburgh. So it's evident that it's not going to happen. So it needs to be on a federal level, because at least on a federal level, I feel more comfortable at the fact of saying, you know what? In most cases, when you get good federal prosecutors, they don't care who you are, who you know, who you're associated with. They'll move in on you. And if they're going to get you, they're going to get you. I look out and I know that this is just not about justice for my father. It's not just about justice for Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. It's about justice for DJ Henry, Detective Christopher Ridley, countless others. Because I'm almost certain that if we don't do anything right now, we'll be back here again, and we'll be saying the same thing again. So if I have to be on the forefront to push for those things, then that's what I'm certainly going to do. Don't let it hit your backyard or come into your backyard like it did with me, to open your eyes, or for you to have that awakening and say, wow, this is what's going on. Because sometimes we do turn a blind eye and we say, well, as long as it's not happening to me. But my father could have been your father. DJ Henry could have been your son. Detective Christopher Ridley, for some of us, could have been your brother. And if they don't respect their own officers, what makes you think they're going to respect us? It took black and Latino organizations from outside of Westchester County, with the exception of blacks in law enforcement, to come in and say, we support the Chamberlain family. And I take that back. Also in Mount Vernon, blacks in blue, they support us as well. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. But you find that, I guess for lack of a better word, people talk a good one. They'll say they're there, oh, I support you, we're here, but they're not. Where are our more prominent black activists at right now? And I reached out to them several times and said, I need your help. Can you please come help me and my family get justice for my father? They're not here. They should be, but they're not here. So I don't worry about it anymore. Why? Because I have you guys, and we're a movement by ourselves. So
That's
I'm not
right.
worried. Because each time the numbers get larger and larger and larger, and we'll do it on our own. They were surprised that even when I used the social networking page, when I used Facebook, they were surprised at the response that I received on Facebook. But that's because people do care, and people are concerned. And people are looking at it and they're saying, wow, if you can kick in a 68-year-old man's door with a heart condition, with COPD, who can't barely walk a few feet without wheezing, call him a nigger, and I don't say the N-word, call him a nigger, because the N-word sounds too nice. So if they can do that, then that just tells me that our lives are just worthless. It just means nothing. So, in closing, I just have one more message really that I want to say, outside the fact that I meant to say this before, police policy and procedures should be open to all of us to be able to see and view.
That's right.
We should be able to look at those things at any given time, online, at request. If we say we want to see your policy regarding this or that, we should be able to see it. But my message right now really is to the media, because I've sat and I've looked at the different programs. When you get reports about this situation regarding my father, or even other situations, good journalism means that you are unbiased. That means that you're balanced. That means that you don't sway either way. I'm not looking for you to take my side, because I'll represent myself. But if you're going to give audio excerpts of my father where the police are alleging that he was aggressive and he was threatening, then please play the 30 minutes before that where you hear the officers disrespecting my father, banging on the door, calling him a nigger, telling him he's a grown-ass man, asking to come in his house so he can take a piss. Really?
That's right.
I can't shed any more tears around this no more. I'm so upset when I look at the whole chain of events and the way everything went. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out. And like I said, it doesn't stop here. I'm still going on. I'm going to continue to fight, not only for my father, but for the DJ Henrys, the Christopher Ridleys, and anybody else that says, Mr. Chamberlain, can you help me in my situation? Because now I know what it is, and I hope that none of you, as Angela Henry said to me in an email, I hope you never become a part of this club. You know, where a loved one's life was taken by law enforcement. Thank you.
My wife got back from a long trip last night, and this morning I said that I had somewhere to go in Westchester, and she was kind of moaning, a little bit upset with me. And then I said, it's a rally about police misconduct, and this really focuses the Chamberlain family. And my wife said, please convey my revulsion to the Chamberlain family and to their lawyers about what went on. And in our county, Orange County, a couple of counties up from here, I think it's fair to say the Chamberlain case, like the Henry case, like the Lombard case, which I'll get to in a minute, touches a tremendous nerve for the very reason that Ken spoke about, which is that his father was in his house. Michael Lombard was shot 19 times in Newburgh 10 weeks ago, 19 times from every direction in his own house. Now, the problem we have, and I'll talk about Henry in a minute, is really very simple. And it's really about two concepts. One is, I've been a civil rights lawyer for 34 years. We have a devaluation, which all these incidents represent, a continuing, profound, historic devaluation of people of color in our society. Let's start understanding that, and it manifests itself everywhere, okay? You can read the new Jim Crow. You can read whatever you'd like to read. You can look in healthcare. You can look in education. You can look in housing. We're in 2012, and we have institutional devaluation across our society. And we have a president of whatever race who doesn't address it. Doesn't address it. Now that doesn't mean the person running against him will. Okay? Now, the second point that's conceptually linked is this. And Mr. Chamberlain mentioned this in a different way. We have a lack of moral outrage. I'm not talking about the law. I'm not talking about the law. The law is a follower. I used to say in Yonkers to the branch all the time, and some of them are here and they can tell you it's true. You be out in the streets and the law will follow you. You be quiet and Judge Sand will fall asleep. In 25 or 27 years in Yonkers, that's the lesson I learned. We do not have moral outrage. And I'm not talking about one community. Morality doesn't have a color. Doesn't have a color. In the 60s, when I started in civil rights, we had white church leaders walking next to Dr. King. We had white labor leaders walking next to Dr. King. Now we have no one walking almost.
That's right.
Okay? Now, we are not going to change these conditions relying on people who, as Randy correctly said, are in elective office. Forget it. They need to be pressured to do the right thing every step of the way. Every step of the way.
That's right.
And if we're not willing to pressure them, go home, go to the beach. You're wasting your time. And the pressure has to have one characteristic: outrage, anger. This is not funny. This is not funny. This is as outrageous as it can be. Now, here's the thing with the Henry case. We've finally gotten records. It's taken us a long time to get records, but we have records. And guess what the records vindicate? The car slowed down, and the shooter jumped on the hood of the car with his gun drawn, and he shot DJ from 2 to 3 feet away. End of story. Don't spend more time on it, ladies and gentlemen. You know why? Because in real time and real space, something happened. Just like in the Chamberlain case. Something happened. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Something killed this man's father. Don't make it more complicated. Don't listen to all the nonsense in the stories. Nobody had any idea what DJ Henry's blood alcohol level was, whatever it was. He was driving a car at 14 miles an hour. Slow enough for a police officer to intentionally jump on the hood of the car and intentionally fire. Don't make it any more complex. We lose the sense of moral outrage by our willingness to tolerate complexity where complexity has no role.
That's right.
This is not quantum physics. This is not quantum physics. This is not. This is the world of affairs, and the world of affairs happens like this. Something happened. And all the obfuscation and all the storytelling and all the nonsense, something happened really fast. Now, like in the Chamberlain case, we have an abomination across the street. We had a lot of lies told to the Henry's face. Let me say that. To the Henry's face. I sat with Janet DeFiorio and I watched her cry her crocodile tears. To their face.
That's right.
And I heard her talk about all her investigators working on the case. Guess what? Town of Mount Pleasant was the only investigator on the case. When discovery came true, that's the records we got. Nobody else's records. Her investigators did nothing. She sat with DJ Henry's parents and said, my investigators are on your case. So don't talk about Democrats or Republicans. We have to be outraged. And I don't care who it helps or who it hurts. It doesn't make any difference. The only thing we need to be concerned about is that the child now crying is not a victim. When Mr. Lemart was shot 10 weeks ago in Newburgh, I went the next morning, and I know I'm taking other people's time and I'm going to close. But this is what I saw. I saw, personally. I saw blood all over this room. I saw bullets everywhere, in a circle all over the room. I saw 4 grown police officers who didn't even have to come in the house. This isn't a fleeing felon. He had some warrant for some nonsense. You get him the next morning. What male ego is piqued by the need to run after this young man and shoot him to death? What? What senselessness? that's only caused by one thing: the devaluation of that man in advance, okay? If you valued his life like you valued your own son, you would never be there. If you valued Mr. Chamberlain like you valued your father, you would have said, is there anything we can do to help you? If you valued DJ Henry, you don't jump in front of a car moving when there's nothing going on. What are you doing? So we need a profound change of consciousness. We really do. And I don't care if there are 100 people here, 1,000 people here. It's never enough. It's never enough. But it's also always enough. Because the people here can take the message. Please take the message of outrage. Don't temporize. Don't feel guilty about being angry. Be angry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Damon Jones. I'm the New York representative of Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. And I was asked to come up here to speak about the Network for Police Accountability organization. But before I get into the network, I just want to say, as black law enforcement, and I said it before, when crimes like this happen in our community, we only 3 degrees of separation from those crimes. Either we know the victim, we know somebody that know the victim, or the victim is a family member. When I heard about the shooting of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., I was sitting, I was like, the name, I know the name. And that night, I got on Facebook, and Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. had sent me the message, and we reached out. I've been dealing with police brutality cases and speaking out from a law enforcement perspective for a while now. And it always hits home when you talk to the family and you hear the family crying about their family member. And it even hit home harder because I knew Kenneth. We grew up together. So yes, I take this personal because it's like a family member that was killed. I knew that brother. We played basketball together. We hung out. We did other things that I'm not going to talk about. But he's my friend. And I'm going to take this to the end. And I'm the one that's going to say the things that Ken can't say. And I'm going to continue to say it. Now, the network of police accountability is many organizations throughout Westchester County have come together for what? Accountability of police, accountability of law enforcement. Why? Because there is none. We cannot expect to have accountability in a county where the district attorney is a member of the Chiefs Association. We cannot expect to have accountability in a county where 43 municipalities' officers are related by blood and marriage and they transfer through different police departments. We cannot expect that. We cannot expect to have accountability in police departments where out of approximately 3,500 police officers, you only have 250 black police officers. That is a travesty. Yonkers has approximately about 450 cops. Maybe they have 15 black cops. There's only one black police commissioner, and that's in Mount Vernon. There's no black officer at a rank higher than lieutenant. So there's no black officers making policies and procedures throughout the 43 municipalities that affect the neighborhoods of color. So that's why police brutality, what we call police criminality, is rampant throughout Westchester County. And now it's up to our elected officials. Like Ken said earlier, it's a travesty, it's a shame. Black elected officials have been silent on this. We expect all elected officials to speak out. But we really expect our black elected officials, because any given day, they could be a victim. Any given day, they could be a victim. But they haven't said anything. I watched how they politically killed DJ Henry twice. Not only by him killing him, but politically killed him. I watched how they didn't even show up for the Henry family or the Henry teammates. we had to go get Eric Adams, Charles Barron. We had to go out to Brooklyn just to get an elected official to say something. The Kenneth Chamberlain family, they have not reached out to him. And here we are, we went back to Brooklyn to Senator Eric Adams to talk about oversight on a state level. He was willing to sit down and talk to us. What's going on? When we had the press conference last week and we spoke on oversight, we spoke about the silence of the black elected official. Ken Jenkins, the highest ranking county black elected official, told a bold-faced lie. Kenneth can't say it, I can say it. He told a bold-faced lie. The Human Rights Commission has not ever handled police brutality cases or made recommendations of police policies and procedures in Westchester County. They never did it. And that is a disrespect, not only to the taxpayers, to the voters, to the victims' families throughout Westchester County, that this man will lie on News 12. But the sad thing about it, the reporter didn't even ask him to prove the case, prove what he said. Now, Yonkers, Ken Jenkins District, Yonkers, the Department of Justice is right there now investigating. Why did the NAACP have to collect complaints, mail them to the Department of Justice, send them to Yonkers, when Ken Jenkins, the legislator of his district, said the Human Rights Commission does that? He shouldn't have lied. He shouldn't have lied. Our organization has sent a letter to Gerald Ruberman, Esquire, the chairman of the Westchester County Human Rights Commission. And we are asking, through the Freedom of Information Act, all police brutality complaints, date received, outcome, and the police departments that the complaints were made against within the last 28 months. But like my mentor Roger Abel said, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. I already know the answer to this question. There is none. There is none. Now, Mr. Sussman spoke about the Henry case, and a dear friend of mine, Benita Zellman, is the attorney for the teammates. She is requesting for a federal monitor of the police departments. This is Rob Astorino's nightmare. Just like HUD was to Andy Spano, this is going to be to Rob Astorino. And we're going to have a meeting with them. The Monday we had the press conference. Tuesday, I happened to have a meeting with the African American Advisory Board. I didn't know that they met in Rob Astorino's conference room. Didn't know that. So I go up on the floor. I said, wow, I'm in the county exec's office. So I'm walking. I'm figuring it's about 6:30. I'm figuring nobody's going to be there. So Mr. Plunkett, who is the deputy county exec, he sees me. Hey, Damon, how you doing? How you doing, Mr. Plunkett? We talked a little bit. Next thing you know, he comes back in. He calls me in. He calls me into Rob Astorino's office. Why'd you do that? Why do what? You have to be accountable now. We met with you. We met with him 2 months after he got elected. Ourselves and the NAACP and other community people, and we expressed our concerns about oversight and the training of officers, not only in Yonkers and Westchester County, but also at the Department of Correction. There were issues up there. And he did the great political thing, said he'd look into it, but after that, we had death after death, we had incident after incident, and he didn't say anything. Now, if Barack Obama, which yes, he has been silent, but with the Trayvon Martin case, he stepped out of the box for a moment, and he put himself in the family's position. He caught hell for it. He probably never do it again, but he stepped out. Now, if he could do it, why haven't our black elected officials done it in Westchester County? That's the question we have to ask. Why haven't you did it? Now, if you can't speak on our concerns, when young black men are being beat and they're being killed by these rogue police officers, these gangs in blue, if you cannot speak up, then we don't need you in office. We're not not going to give you our vote. We're not going to give you our money. And we're going to vote you out. And we're going to put young men and women that's going to address the needs of the African American community as well as all the communities. But this is an issue. This is an issue. After the death, I'm going to make this quick, and I'm going to sit down. After the death of Detective Ridley, they had a panel, and it was a use of force panel, which supposedly they were supposed to review the training of the officers. The paper wasn't worth this piece of paper I have right here. Because guess what? They had no power to enforce the recommendations on the 43 municipalities. And Mr. Astorino knows this. They have no power to make changes. They only have power with Westchester County employees, which is corrections, sheriffs, and county police, and probation. So they have to create some type of legislation. But that's why we went to Senator Adams, because if we can't do it in the county, we will do it in the state. But if the county can't do it, we will start to do it ourselves. And that's what the Network for Police Accountability is about. If these elected officials is not going to do it, we'll do it ourselves. We won't give you our vote. We'll vote you out. We put some people with some balls up in there that's going to talk about it and be about it and represent the people. Thank you very much.
And Luis Quiroz, Vice Chair of our board. My family, my cousins got mad at me today because we were supposed to gather in the Poconos for a barbecue. But when I explained to them why I was going to stay home today, they understood. We grew up in the city of Newark, New Jersey, a city that's had a very long history of violence with the police. So they only wished they had known about it earlier so they could come and join me. Good day, everyone. Buenos días a todos. Quiero darle las gracias a los que están aquí que hablan español, porque este es un problema que afecta no solamente a la comunidad afroamericana, pero sino también a la comunidad hispana. Somos todos personas de color. I want to give thanks to those that are here that are Latino today, especially because we recognize that this is a problem that does not affect just Mr. Chamberlain and other African Americans,
That's right.
but
That's
Latino
right.
people
That's
as
right.
well.
That's right.
On behalf of the Lower Hudson Valley Civil Liberties Union Board, I would like to extend condolences to the Chamberlain family on the loss of their loved one. This is, however, a loss for all of us. A loss of a veteran who we remember on Memorial Day weekend. It is a loss of a retired law enforcement officer who died at the hands of law enforcement.
That's right.
A vocation to which he dedicated himself for 20 years. More than that, it is a loss for all of us. The loss of justice anywhere is the loss of justice everywhere. Unfortunately, however, Mr. Chamberlain is just one of too many men and women of color who are targeted all too often because of the color of their skin and subjected to unreasonable stop and frisks, unreasonable searches, and in this case, excessive force, which resulted in death. This is an issue that the African American and Latino community face all too often. I have seen it in my roles as a teacher here in White Plains, an immigration attorney, and now as a member of this board. We all understand that the police have a difficult job to do, and we support the many police officers that protect our towns and cities every day and treat us with the respect and humanity to which we are all entitled. Those are not the police officers with whom we take issue. However, when the police use racial slurs to taunt a member of the community that they have sworn to protect, something is wrong. The inference or suggestion that the use of the N-word is a police tactic is insulting to our intelligence. No police officer would drive into the many affluent areas of our county and use an ethnic or racial slur knocking on the door of one of those citizens to get them to open the door.
That's right.
And we all know that. So don't tell us that it's a police tactic. I'm insulted by that. When the police storm into a law-abiding elderly citizen's apartment, hit him with bean pellets, taser him, and then shoot him dead, something is clearly wrong. The fact that we have to continually point out that Mr. Chamberlain was a retired corrections officer and a veteran to highlight his contributions and value to our community only goes to show how much we have come to accept the violence that is continually perpetrated against people of color. He could have been homeless. He could have been the man that mows our lawn, cleans our pool, does anything or nothing. He was a human being, and this should not have happened. It isn't just physical violence, but a violence of the spirit, a violence of our humanity. It needs to stop. We call upon the federal government, we call upon the county district attorney's office, and upon each local municipality to, 1, support the creation of an independent review board. 2, hold police officers accountable for violations of police protocol, and more than that, for violations of common sense and justice. When numerous calls were made to let the police know that Mr. Chamberlain was fine, that no one in his apartment was threatened, that it was a mistake, the officers should have left. That's common sense. That's community policing. That didn't happen. 3, to improve recruitment procedures. We need to pay police officers higher salaries and demand more from those we entrust with guns to protect our communities. And 4, to stop the targeting of people of color for random and arbitrary stop and frisks. The great freedom fighter and friend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, once said, "We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community." Westchester County is one of the richest counties in our great nation.
That's right.
But if we don't look out for the rights of the most vulnerable, for those that serve us with humility, for those which our Constitution vows to protect, then we are poor indeed.
Jose Perez
Thank you.
and others who suffer because of institutional violence, I am so sorry. I pray that by the work you are doing now, by the collective efforts of all of us, you will find some measure of healing and peace. Let my small voice be added to each and every voice here to say to the public servants of Westchester County, you are serving us, all of us.
That's right.
Regardless of where we were born, what language we speak, what color our skin is, where our children go to school. To those public servants who are actively working to build bridges, I say thank you. Thank you to the police officers who are working to gain the trust of the communities they serve. Thank you to the elected officials who take very seriously their sworn duty to serve all the people in their jurisdiction. But to those who take their obligations lightly, who do not hear the cries for justice coming from the families of victims of institutional violence, we say, get out of the way.
That's right.
Get out of the way. It's time to break down these old institutions. It's time for us. for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each other accountable. It's time for us to build up new systems to hold each ot It's time to put in place new systems with the force of law, not just with good intentions. Let us break down the old systems piece by piece and build up the new ones with the power of love behind us.
Attorney Michael Sussman said, be angry. I remember friends of mine who in the late 60s felt a whole lot, middle 60s, felt a whole lot more comfortable with Dr. King than they did with Malcolm X because they thought that Dr. King wasn't angry. I don't think Dr. King wasn't angry. I think he was plenty angry, and I think he gave us a good model for being angry and expressing it in a particular mediated way, and a way that people could hear, which is not intended as a put down of Malcolm, by the way. I would say the same for the Chamberlain family. With dignity and with composure, they have given a measured response to this infuriating, painful situation. How many members of the Chamberlain family are here? Could you raise your hands and let us know? And there are others who have been here who couldn't come today. I want to thank you for bonding with us, with those of us who really wanted to be able to use this one horrifying incident to draw attention to a horrifying larger situation. So what's the Network for Police Accountability? It's really us. It's really everybody who's here. It's a network of organizations who specifically said, I want our group to be part of the network, and it's also a lot of individuals who said, I want to know what's going on. If you have not signed the sign-in sheet there, and by the way, the petition that Damon Jones made available to us, please do sign it, because we will be, we do notify people. We need to have a listserv. If there is anyone here who is willing to work with me on setting up a listserv, I don't know how to do that, and I really want to do that. The Martin Luther King Institute, in which I am active, has taken the coordinating role in this network, but I need some technical help. We want the issue today, the issues, to make headlines. So for lots of reasons, we want this march to be pretty orderly and dignified. The other reason is, as has been pointed out, I think the White Plains Police would probably not be too unhappy if there were a reason to have the headline be that there'd been a whole lot of disorder among the people who are complaining. I think we want to keep up the model that the Chamberlain family has set for us. And also the Martin Luther King Institute's name is on the permit, so you're helping us too. We want to march probably 2 by 2, or 3 by 3, or 1 by 1, depending on, we have to keep moving, that's a condition of the permit. We have to stay on the sidewalk, we can't block traffic. We have a lot of signs. Please look at the table and pick up some sign. Those signs will speak for us. Pick up a sign and take it and carry it proudly. We have a permit for 50 people to march. I'm not sure what that's going to mean. The White Plains Police said if there are more, there may be a problem. So we want to make sure that there are more operating in a very orderly way. We have people designated as marshals. 2 of them have taken the yellow vests, and the marshal's job is to remind, and we could use one more volunteer with a yellow vest, and we could use lots of volunteers if people are kind of wandering into the street and blocking traffic or anything like that. walking.
Anyone volunteer? One more marshal?
One more marshal.
Thank you.
Lots of people, we have attorneys, we have lots of people who can say whatever needs to be said to remind us. There may be people among us who would like to see this disrupted, we don't know, and we need to make sure that we dissociate ourselves from them. We'll have another rally at the other end, as I said. When we get to the statue of Martin Luther King, we have several speakers set up then. If we have time, we'll have a speak out so people who weren't scheduled can say something. And I thank you all for being here, and I think this is a wonderful turnout for a sunny day, and what a great way to spend the first day of the holiday weekend, to celebrate together that we have strength in a growing movement for justice.